Hello, we're going to talk about Chapter 4, Ethical and Sustainable Sourcing. So this book has a lot to say about being green and what consumers expect from their companies that they want to buy from as it pertains to sustainable sourcing. So we're going to talk a lot about that in this chapter. So the outline here is we're going to talk a little bit about ethical and sustainable sourcing, how to get those strategies built, what the initiatives are that will fulfill those strategies. We talked a little bit in Chapter 3 about early supplier involvement and why it's important. If you remember, I gave you the example about, I said I'm going to make purple shampoo, and if I have a supplier involved early and they tell me that's going to be twice as expensive on the coloring because to make purple we have to have red and blue. If you could just have light blue or pink or a color where we can just put one color in, it would be less expensive to manufacture. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about strategic alliances. We're going to talk about how we reward suppliers who do what we are encouraging them to do and how we benchmark what that means, and figuring out the firm's sourcing function and how we're doing and how to assess whether we're making good progress toward maturing the function for sourcing. So I think I told you in Chapter 2, but I'll kind of remind you, purchasing, procurement, sourcing, buying, all those are the same word. So they can have a lot of impact. If you'll remember that example that we looked at in Chapter 2 about increasing sales by 10% versus decreasing cost of goods by 10% and what a huge difference it makes. Decreasing cost of goods in that example doubled the profit of the company. So we definitely want to do that. There's also an increasing number of people who are doing this on a global basis, and so other countries don't have necessarily the ethical constraints that the United States operates under or a lot of the EU operates under, and so we're going to need to talk about what those things are. I think you probably also are aware, if you've ever seen any film or talked to anyone who's lived in China, that there are a lot of environmental requirements that the United States and other countries adhere to that are not necessary or even common at all in countries like China. So strategic sourcing is a very recent word. It's come about in about the last 10 years that talks about how are we going to look at the procurement function and really make it a business enabler. What can we do to make sure that we are leveraging all the things, we're pulling all the levers that procurement can provide to us to make the best decisions to support our firm's goals. So we want sustainable and ethical sourcing. We want to make sure we have great supplier relationships and that we're improving those over time, that we're looking for suppliers who have good social conscience. That means they're not employing children, they're not working in countries where there's not a livable wage, they're not doing anything to poison or pollute the environment, things like that, and that we're monitoring and making sure we're rewarding those suppliers that are doing what we ask. So you've probably all heard the word ethics before, and as it relates to business ethics is saying we're going to apply ethical principles to business situations. So if I can give you an example, this has been much published, but if you wouldn't want to read about it on the front page of the paper, if you wouldn't want it to show up on the first Google search of your name, or if you would be embarrassed if your parents heard, it's probably not ethical and you shouldn't do it. So corporate social responsibility is the practice of business ethics. But what this means is that as a company, I'm going to make a decision that I am not going to deal with suppliers who do not conform to the same ethics that I conform to. So if I say I work in the United States, I live in the United States, and I do not believe that children should be forced to work. I do not believe that people should be working 12 and 14 and 16-hour days and not getting paid overtime. I do not believe that they should be asked to work in a condition that is unfair or unsafe or hot or freezing or whatever the things may be. So all those things, I don't think that, I don't want to work with a company that is polluting the environment or dumping their waste into a river or something like that. So ethical sourcing takes those two things and kind of puts that together and says, I want to make sure that I'm going to bring positive change about because I'm going to buy from companies that have the same ethical standpoint that I have. So if you think about it, what we're basically saying is I'm going to control my ability to make positive change in the world because I am not going to do business with people that I do not think are ethical or sustainable. So sustainable is another aspect of this, and that means that if I'm cutting down a tree, I'm planting a tree. If I'm creating carbon footprint, I'm doing something to improve the environment on the other side, things like that. So this is what your policy should include if you have a good, ethical, and sustainable sourcing policy. Where the goods are coming from and how they were made, I would say also by whom they were made, making sure that the workers are being treated properly and they're not being asked to do things in an unfair working environment, or that they're free to come and go. They're not like indentured servants, that kind of thing. Knowledge of the supplier's workplace principles. How are they treating their employees? How are they paying their employees, etc. Inclusion of the ethics as a supplier performance rating. So I'm going to say if you're conducting yourself ethically or not, that is going to be on my supplier scorecard. And we're going to talk more about that in another chapter. I'm going to have somebody audit. I'm not just going to take my supplier's word for it. I'm going to have someone go to the location, a third-party auditor or someone on our procurement staff, and we're going to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. And we are going to provide a detailed ethical expectation list policy to our suppliers. I didn't put ETI or fair trade on your test, but you should just know fair trade means that it's manufactured or grown by a disadvantaged producer. Generally, this is going to be in a third or fourth world country, and that if that is the case, we give them a fair price for their goods. You may hear like fair trade coffee, things like that. What this means is just because they're in a third or fourth world country, if I pay $1 for something in a developed country, I shouldn't go there and say, well, I'll pay you 50 cents, knowing that they're going to be so grateful for the 50 cents that they'll take it. They should get a fair price even though they're in a developing country. This is a chart. This is not going to be on your test, but this is some things that you should know are part of the Ethical Trading Initiative. Employees freely chosen. So we said like no bonded, no forced, involuntary prison labor, things like that. The ability to have association or form a union. Working conditions are safe and hygienic, no child labor. A living wage. So what a living wage means, number 5, is that you make enough money that you can survive. So in the United States, a lot of people think that the minimum wage should be higher because it may or may not, depending on which side of the issue you're on, be, quote, a living wage. Number 6, that your working hours aren't excessive, that people aren't discriminated against, that we don't say there's some kind of regular employment is guaranteed to people, and that there's no harsh or inhumane treatment allowed. So this is the Ethical Trading Initiative's kind of base code. These are the 9 things that they say if you adhere to this, you are an ethical employer. So green is all through this book. I've said it a couple times, but green purchasing means I'm trying to buy from suppliers that have waste reduction, reuse, recycle, repurpose goals. And sustainability, as I said a minute ago, is providing the parts that the supply chain needs, but not doing something today that is going to prevent us from doing it in the future because it's not, quote, sustainable. I can't continue to do this indefinitely because I'm depleting national resources. So the people that are generally adhering to a sustainable sourcing model consider the following 3 things, and you'll notice they're in orange: people, planet, profit. So we want to grow revenues. Obviously, the most important thing for any for-profit business is to grow revenues. We want to decrease costs. We want to manage our risk. And we want to make sure we have a good reputation as far as social and environmental responsibility within the marketplace. Okay, so there are 2 different kinds of things: functional products and innovative products. So functional products are things that have been in the market for a while, generally low profit and pretty stable demand. So if you think about Coke, any kind of apparel, things like that. Innovative products are generally things like an iPhone, things that change a lot. They have a short life cycle. The demand can go up and down drastically, but they're generally very high profit. Fewer people compete in these, so this is 2 kind of categories. All right, if you're going to put an ethical and sustainable strategy together, these are the steps that you need to follow. I did not put this on your test, but I just want you to know there is a framework here that you should follow. We're going to go back again to ISO 9000 and ISO 14000. If you can recall, 9000 is about quality, 14000 is about the environment. You should know the difference. This is definitely on your test. So supply-based rationalization. So the word rationalization when it comes to supply chain means taking a big group and making it into a smaller group. So if we have 1,000 suppliers, it's difficult for us to get really good pricing because we're buying things from so many people. If we can get that down to 300 or 400 suppliers, now I can say, okay, the guy that I buy nails from, if I buy screws, hammers, and saws from you, will you drop my price on everything because I'm going to give you so much more business? Yes, I will. Okay, now we're a strategic supplier. So that rationalization process is taking a large supply base, consolidating it down to a smaller number so that you can get better pricing. And you can see at the bottom it shows you reduced purchase price, fewer supplier management problems, closer interaction between the buyer and the supplier, and usually greater delivery and reliability. Okay, we talked about this in Chapter 2, but outsourcing allows a firm to concentrate on the core business activities and reach its sustainability goals. So if I say that my company is a tax preparer, maybe I really don't know a whole lot about payroll taxes. Maybe I really don't. Well, that's a bad example because you do know about payroll taxes. Maybe you don't know a lot about preparing contracts. So you might hire a law firm on retainer and say, I need you to do all the contracts for my business because my business is working on taxes for other people and I know that, but I don't know how to write contracts. I'm not a lawyer. So concentrating on your core business activities. You can also think about this as it stands to your home. I gave you the example of I don't mow my own lawn. I run my household. I teach school. I work on a full-time job. I raise 2 children. I have other things to do. My husband and I choose that we're going to pay someone else to do that for us so that we have more time to concentrate on running our household. The SEDEX is the Supplier Ethical Data Exchange, and this is a way to find out. They score large companies on how they do on their social responsibility and ethical business practices. Okay. ESI, so early supplier involvement. Again, this is my example about the shampoo. You just want to make sure that what you're designing, if you're coming up with a new product, is manufacturable. And the more you have someone early involved that knows about what you're going to do, the more they can help you to make sure that you do something that is easy to manufacture and inexpensive to manufacture as possible while still meeting your goals. They call that value engineering. That's what the supplier is providing to you, is value engineering. They're helping you reduce your cost, improve your quality as you do new product development. Okay, vendor managed inventory. VMI is a great way to do things to stock things that are used often. So let's say office supplies, if we ever get to go back to an office. If you have vendor managed inventory, then that means somebody like Office Depot or Staples or Tejas Office Supplies, whoever it may be that you buy from, says, I see that you use about 6 cases of paper a week. I see that you use about 4 boxes of highlighters a week, about this many pens, whatever. They own all the inventory of your office supplies in your office, and they come every week or every 2 weeks, however often, and they replenish everything. So if you had 10, they get there's only 4. They're going to put 6 more in there, and they're going to send you a bill for the 6 that they just gave you. So you're paying as you use it, but they're responsible for making sure that the inventory levels are kept current. And it's just something you don't have to worry about. So from the buyer's standpoint, I don't have to worry about it now. Office Depot is going to come in and make sure I never run out of pens. It's their deal. They come on Thursday. They come on Tuesday. I don't care how often they come. All I care about is I never run out and I don't have to worry about it. From the supplier's perspective, it's great because they own the business. Nobody else is going to be able to get in there because this is their deal. Also, They decide, I can go there every other week or I can go there every week. They can set a schedule that makes sense for them. So I'm going to be in this building already, or I'm going to be in this area already. I can come to all these offices on Tuesday. It also keeps someone from ordering the wrong thing and having to have returns and things like that. And it gives them an opportunity to educate the customer about other products because they're in the person's office all the time managing inventory. So it's really a good deal. Co-managed inventory is not that common anymore. And then supplier colo, or what they call JIT2, is, you don't need to know that, but that's not as common as vendor managed inventory. So strategic alliances is a whole nother category. Strategic alliance is an extension of supplier development. It basically says I'm going to bring it down to a very few key suppliers, strategic suppliers, and I'm going to really, really work closely with them on new products. I'm going to work closely with them on their suppliers, which is called a second tier supplier. A strategic supplier would be the first tier, and then their suppliers. So if you think about, I'm going to order a piece of sheet metal, a case for something I'm manufacturing, like a box that it would go in, then the sheet metals companies' suppliers would be their painter, the person that provides the sheet metal to them, maybe some components that go inside of that, things like that. So you're working with those. So Strategic Alliance has this 5-step program of how you're going to put a Strategic Alliance program together. I did not put this on your test, but it's just something that you should know. Collaborative negotiations, some people call them integrative negotiations, just basically means everybody's going to work together, again, toward that win-win. This is how we do that. You want to reward your suppliers as much as possible. Punishment is not used as much anymore, but there is something called a bill back penalty. It's especially seen in construction. Basically, it says, if you're late, I'm going to charge you this much every day that you're late. You tell me you can get this project done in 60 days. On day 61, you owe me $10,000. On day 62, you owe me $20,000. If it goes more than a week, you owe me $15,000 a day. Like you're gonna that kind of a thing is common in construction, but reward usually works better. And what you can do is say, if you'll help me work with your suppliers to lower costs, I'll share some of that savings with you. I'll give you a longer contract, or I'll give you additional business that you don't have today, help you with training, or again, the awards, a press release, we reward this supplier for working with us, that kind of thing. Benchmarking means comparing yourself to another business. So benchmarking says, I'm paying my average person $10.47, and they're generating $53,677 in revenue per head, per month, per person, whatever. So that's benchmarking. It's comparing what you have to what someone else has, sometimes within your industry, often across industries, to give you information about whether you're paying too much, you're spending too much, it's taking you too long to do things, whatever. We do a ton of benchmarking in my company. So some places that you can go to get that help. There's 3 listed here. I do believe that's on your test. And the sourcing function is one of the most valuable ones. We talked about this because you want to monitor performance against what everybody else is doing. Set standards, goals, benchmarks. And there are so many ways that those self-assessments can be used to make sure that annually we're getting the best out of our suppliers and our sourcing function remains strong. This is a list of things that we can assess our sourcing function in. So this means anyone who works in sourcing, anyone who's a buyer, or anyone who is in procurement or in sourcing, this could be how we could assess them. And this is the skill sets that we say we need today. We need you to know how to negotiate. If you're going to work and be successful in sourcing, strategic sourcing, purchasing, procurement, negotiating contracts, helping to select suppliers, managing those relationships, and keeping costs down. Things that you can do to help control costs, number 4, are rationalizing that supply base, using global agreements, and looking at all the technology that you have at your disposal so that you can be as efficient as possible. We're going to move on now to Chapter 5.